You're in the market for a jet. How do you go about buying one? Well, one entrepreneur thinks that you'd rather spend your $30 million in a comfortable modern sales environment than with a broker on the telephone. So he created the jet business. We're in London at the Luxury Society Keynote Conference, and we're speaking with the man himself. Steve Varsano, welcome to INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you very much.
How do you get people to come into your store? It's right there at Hyde Park Corner. Lots of traffic, lots of international traffic. How do you say, come in, buy a jet?
The first thing we did was try to create a brand, because there's no brand that exists in the pre-owned aircraft world. And about 80% of our business is in pre-owned and 20% is in new. One of the other ways we do is by word of mouth. And that way is because we're located right on Hyde Park Corner, which I think is really the epicenter of the world as far as high net worth eyeballs. We've picked a location that really as many of these people drive by it as we could find. And so when they drive by, they get stunned a little bit by seeing in the front window a full-size Airbus corporate jet. You see a hologram of airplanes flying in and out. You see models of airplanes. It's a combination of things that grab your attention, and they get curious. They actually make another round around the circle or the roundabout and say, I got to go back in there and see what this is about.
So what is the thinking behind this concept? Certainly a lot of wealthy people come through London. So what made you think that they would come in and buy a jet from you?
I just thought there was a real void in our industry. I mean, previously, back 15, 20 years ago, most of the market was in America. It was about 80%. So it was easy to fly to see a client in America. I was based out of New York. It was easier. The world's changed drastically. The demographic location of the ultra high net worth person or the corporate executives that were really growing have changed. And it went from 80% down to 45% in America. Not because America had diminished its demand, it's just that the rest of the world had a new demand. So it's these emerging markets and even beyond that, the frontier markets, which really have grown.
And what do you offer that's different?
First of all, we get an experience. We want to educate the client because we think that if the client is completely 100% educated, he'll make a decision to move forward. So we decided to actually build an app that takes the client through a whole learning process on such an easy-to-use, self-usable model that the client can feel like he is teaching himself and he's not being told what to buy. So he's actually taking ownership of the decision.
Now, you created this app yourself. So what kind of data can you put into the app that will answer all these questions? I mean, you can pair up the buyer and the planes.
Yeah, the first thing is to find out for the client is what airplane actually meets their needs. And what we do is we take them through a 4-step process. It's very simple. There's about 135 different aircraft models you can pick from if you just have no budget. And you just say, I want to buy a jet. So we actually take them through these 4 steps, which is how much do you want to spend, how many passengers do you want to carry, how far do you want to go, and how new of an airplane would you be willing to buy. If I take those 4 parameters, I can narrow this down to make his decision very easy, what his options could be. And then we really laser focus on those 4 situations, what airplane meets his needs. Anything above that, he can have, but at least we show him what the bottom, lowest level airplane they should get. And then what we'll do is start comparing those side by side to educate them and make them make the decision.
There's a passion behind all of this that suggests that you're not just selling airplanes because it's what you're doing right now. Where does this passion come from?
When I was 14 years old, I went up for my first flying lesson, and it's just stuck with me. I love dealing with people, but more so, I really enjoy learning anything. And the clientele that we deal with are absolutely the most successful entrepreneurs in the world. They're the most successful business people, the most successful political people, the most successful entertainers. So the ability to be able to see and meet these people, not to be googly eyes over them, but actually to learn from them about any concept, any fantasy, any dream, anything, how they did it. It's just something that I sort of like to soak up like a sponge, and that's what I really enjoy doing.
So who is buying jets today?
It's an interesting question. I think that the emerging markets is important, and it is growing at the largest percentage of any category. However, they're growing from a very small absolute number. So you might hear China is growing at 25% a year for the last few years. But it's starting at such a tiny, tiny number. I mean, China, for example, is probably has about 150 jets in the whole country. And if you include Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau area, maybe about 300 jets. That's out of a total of 20,000 jets in the whole world. So it's a fraction, a tiny fraction of the world. But it's important because they're buying the larger jets for the most expensive money, and they're buying newer aircraft, so they're important to the manufacturers. We're finding a big market in most countries that have natural resources, energy, technology. So you're looking at places like Nigeria, you're looking at Russia, Ukraine, Angola. You're looking now, it's starting agricultural places start to pick up. The economy's getting better in a lot of places in the world. You see in the middle of America where people weren't buying new aircraft, these agricultural type companies, they're starting to buy now. I think if you look at where the people are starting to order new aircraft, it's really a great indicator of where the economies are starting to grow. And so we get a really good advanced look at the economy.
What about the customer? Age, sex, occupation?
Well, a large percentage of course, men who are buying. However, I would say that a larger percentage of the woman is behind the man who tells them, I like this one instead of that one. But the man ultimately will sign the check for the corporation or for themselves. I think that as far as age, it's an interesting question because it's a rough guess, but I would say in the last 15 years, the average age of the buyer has decreased by 15 years. Well, I would think that back 15 years ago, the average buyer was somewhere in the 60 to 65 area, and today it's really in the 45 to 50 area.
So he's getting younger.
It's getting younger.
How is your business? You've been doing this for a year now?
Yes.
Are you actually selling jets?
Yes, we're definitely selling jets. I'd say we've been open now for about 15, 16 months. The first 6 months was incredibly painful because, again, like I said, I was trying to create a brand. And one thing I forgot to do was to really understand the fact that I actually had to operate a business when we opened the doors. So all of my deal flow, my client base, I wasn't able to follow up with them the day we opened because I was dealing with the typical corporate things, you know, HR, human resources, advertising, concepts, budgets, contracts, having people coming in, interviewing, landlord issues. It really changes everything. And so my business actually just went down the tubes for the first 6 months, and I had a whole new staff in a new environment with a new concept, with a new brand, and it took a while for them to learn what we were doing and for me to teach them. But now it's like a locomotive that's come out of the station. Once it starts going, it's really powering strongly, and we're seeing our fruits of our labor from last year. It's just amazing now what's happening in the last 3 months.
Did you have partners when you went into this, or this was
No.
all yours? You had financial backing?
No,
That's a big risk.
it's a huge risk. There's many sleepless nights, and it still is.
Now, what worries you most in all of this? I mean, what could derail your plans here? I mean, a spike in the cost of gasoline or air fuel, or I mean, what worries you? You're worrying all night anyway, it seems so.
Well, you're worrying about trying to close the deal, and whenever you're in a transaction, there's always something that's going to happen. It's a very complicated process. I don't really like to look in the rearview mirror, so I sort of look forward. I don't look at what's going to happen, what will happen with the economy. I sort of try to find the next buyer. And since we are the most global business probably of any industry, you know, one client might be in Mexico, one might be in China, one might be in India, one might be down the street from me in London. So really, we're actually cherry picking or looking for those clients and trying to find how we find that next one.
And so how do you find him, and who is he?
Well, out of the 7 billion people in the world, there's actually 1,200 billionaires. If you want to call the super, uber, ultra high worth person, that's probably them. But most banks would look at a buyer if his net worth was about 5 times the value of the airplane. So if you have a $20 million airplane, you should find somebody who's worth $100 million. And that's generally what we find in the industry.
And how do you attract him or her, or are they just attracted to you if they're in the market for a plane, or his entourage is attracted to you?
Well, that's the key, the marketing. I mean, trying to build a brand, trying to get out there in a lot of the advertising, but really more an editorial type of marketing. We have been very, very fortunate since we've opened to have hundreds of articles in magazines, newspapers. We've been on 15 or 20 television shows, And we've been very lucky to be able to build a brand. Everybody in our industry now knows us. I sort of call us the Switzerland of aircraft brokers. We get along with everybody. We do business with everybody.
So what's your outlook for the luxury sector, including planes, but not only planes?
Everybody who we meet in our business is absolutely into luxury and brands. It is amazing how people are brand conscious. There's no question about it. And we see people come in with the highest level watches, the highest, best haute couture clothing. The jewelry is at the top of the line. They come in with their Rolls Royces and the Bentleys and all these kind of cars. We are at a lot of charity events, we're at a lot of dinner parties, a lot of events. Everybody is into luxury and brands in that stratosphere because it's a very unique type of space. But I think that people love feeling good about themselves. And the way they do that is by buying a luxury product. Even down to the lowest level person, I'm not talking about lowest level from financially, but if you look at a person who is a typical person who works in a fast food restaurant, they will go to Tiffany's and they will buy a key ring for $50 so that they can have that blue bag. And it just makes them feel good about themselves.
And let me end by asking you what advice you might give to entrepreneurs. You've taken a risk here, you're working very hard. What would you say to somebody who's, gee, I want to be an entrepreneur and start my own business? What would you say?
Well, you have to have very tough skin. It's a very lonely process because you want to think out of the box. You have to be adventurous. You have to be convincing to other people and to yourself. You have to have passion that there is no definition for. I mean, it has to be over the top. If you are not passionate about what you want to design, build, sell, create, just get out of that business. Because if you don't have the passion, that is 100% what you need to do anything. Of course, follow through of anything is more important than an idea. So you can have the passion, and you can think about it, and you can be in love with it. But if you don't have the follow through and the commitment to actually create it, and no matter what, basically walking over dead bodies to get to the end result, you really have to have that laser focus to do whatever it takes to get there. And it's not always a pretty journey, but this is something that's very important.
Okay, Steve Varsano, thank you very much for being with us on INSEAD Knowledge.
Thank you very much for having me.